If you haven't noticed up to this point, you'll come to know soon enough that Aquinas was wordy. Now, I don't mean that in the modern sense, like he used many words to explain simple things. On the contrary, Aquinas did quite the opposite. He used very few words to explain complex things. In the Summa Theologica alone, he penned 1.5 million words, which, when you think about it, is a pretty good word count when you're summarizing just about every aspect of the Catholic theology. In fact, 1.5 million words seems as straw compared to the infinite realities of the eternal divine light that lives and breathes within and around us. Here's the thing. In order for Aquinas to simplify divine truth for man to understand, he had to use precise words to do it. Because of the universality of the topic of theology, some of the key words Aquinas used in his Summa can be confusing for us. Words like form, agent, and accidents tend to illustrate images in our minds based on present-day common meanings like shape, police officers, and spilled milk. These are not what Aquinas had in mind when he used them to explain the totality of the Christian faith. That's why this video will likely be one you return to often in your Thomistic growth. Think of it as a primer on the many terms that Aquinas uses in his philosophical and theological writings, a pocket dictionary of sorts that you can come back to when Aquinas starts to get a bit difficult to understand. Alright, so here we go. I present to you the top 10 key words of the Thomistic Lexicon. Essence. Before I started studying Aquinas, I understood the word essence to mean a particular smell that originated from a thing. So, for example, the essence of the locker room was smelly socks, while the essence of my mom was her lilac perfume. After I started reading the Summa, I had to redefine the word's significance in my head so that I could understand its deeper, truer meaning. For Aquinas, the essence of a thing is its most true reality. In other words, the essence of a thing is what it actually is. You're human, therefore your essence is human being and all that comes with it. A humanoid body, a rational soul with an intellectual capacities of memory and imagination, etc. With essence comes limits, a box by which all things are properly defined. You cannot fly like a bird or survive in the Arctic conditions like a polar bear because that is not your essence. Essence is being properly defined. Substance. A substance is not simply a thing or an item. It is something that exists within itself as a unique thing within an essence. So, if human being is the essence, then one particular human being, for example me, is a substance unique to all other human beings. My knowledge, physical features, and soul exist within itself as unique to the knowledge, physical features, and souls of every other human being in existence. So substance then can refer to the uniqueness of a thing within its essence. For example, my dog and your dog are both of the essence of dogs, but the substance of your dog is different from the substance of my dog because they are two different beings, unique in their existences. Accident. In the Aquinas lexicon, accidents are not what happens when you text while driving. They are, on the contrary, the quantities, qualities, and relations that can exist in both one thing as well as in other things. So I'm a word nerd, and I like to think of accidents as adjectives. If you can describe a thing with one adjective, you can also describe another thing with that same adjective. For example, this apple is red, but so is a stop sign. The same accidental word red can refer to both the apple and the sign, but that doesn't change the apple's appleness nor the sign's signness. The accident can exist within both things. So like I said, quantities, qualities like knowledge, size, weight, color, etc., and reactions are all accidents that, when stripped away, leave the thing with nothing but their substance, then later their essence. Form. Form is the principle of its material organization. Form can be equated to shape to a certain extent. It's a means through which the sense can identify the organization of a material thing. It is malleable too, always subject to change. For humans, we begin as babies. Our cells develop into organs within our mother's womb, and as they grow, our bodily form changes. We are then born and grow into children, then adults. All the while, we experience changes in form. Our material makeup changes very little, but the way it is organized does over the course of our lifetime. The same is true for all other material things. Hence, form identifies the organization of material things. Potentiality. If forms are subject to change, then they are said to have potentiality. Potential then means to have the ability to change. Now, we've already talked about how potency can exist within form or material things, but potency can exist in act as well. This makes it a spiritual term as well as a physical term. As humans, we have the potential to act in ways that will benefit our souls, but we are also susceptible to potentially act in ways that will damn our souls. In the same way that we can choose to eat healthy, exercise, and live a healthy lifestyle, and achieve the highest potential of our physical living, we can also choose to partake in any or all of the spiritual virtues and achieve the potential of our spiritual existence. So, our fullest potential is achieved when, during the beatific vision, we not only see God, but we are like Him. Actuality. This one is simple because it actually is what the word means. Actuality is what a thing currently is and has yet to potentially become. It is similar to form, which refers to material things only, but actuality can also refer to non-material things, such as knowledge and emotions. Actuality, then, is always surrounded by potentiality, because what we actually are can change into a different actuality. Every time you learn something new, for example, you're moving from one actuality to another. When I learned addition, it became a gateway to learn subtraction, then multiplication, then division. I worked my way up the math ladder to actualize myself to learn algebra, geometry, trigonometry, etc. Matt Fradd and Robert Delfino give a tremendous explanation as to why actuality is important when they wrote, because, as Aquinas argues, all things, except for God, have potentiality. Ultimately, all things are dependent on God to actualize them. Agent intellect. In my last video, I talked about how humans have the ability to abstract deeper meaning of things from our natural senses. The ability to abstract comes from what Aquinas refers to as the agent intellect. This means that since humans are able to reason, we are able to use our intellect to achieve knowledge of a thing. This knowledge can then be examined to determine the essence of that thing, as well as its actuality and its possible potentiality. When the agent intellect is graced with divine revelation, it is capable of obtaining true wisdom as it relates to the thing being observed. So, for example, if I abstract this apple and identify its appleness as its primary essence, I have identified what it actually is. But if I think about its potential, I can use the apple in 4 different ways. I could eat the apple because I like the taste, which would fulfill my natural animalistic desire for sustenance. 2, I could eat it to provide nutrients for my body, which would be exercising the virtue of prudence. 3, I could also not eat it and allow it to die unused and wasted, which would exercise my choice to choose the vice of sloth over the virtue of prudence. Or 4, I could give it to the poor beggar on the corner so that he could receive the heightened actuality of his body through the nutrition that the apple provides. So in options 1, 2, and 3, I use my agent intellect to know the apple and its potential to either fulfill its purpose or wither and die. Or in option 4, I could unite this knowledge with the divine revelation that this apple could fulfill God's law to love the beggar, who is my neighbor, as I love myself. Passion. In today's world, the word passion carries some serious, heavy philosophical weight. We use it to express our hobbies, our talents, our feelings, our emotions, and even our sexual expressions. All of these are hints to an interior desire to act in a certain way. When Aquinas uses the word passion, he refers to the soul as it is drawn to a thing by the appetitive power rather than by the apprehensive power, because the soul has, through its appetitive power, an order to things as they are in themselves. In other words, the intellect is drawn to a thing because it believes that the thing will bring it happiness. The soul tries to put this thing in what it believes to be the proper order so as to produce a more joyful life. Thomas goes on to say that both good and evil passions exist within the soul, and the intellect must practice self-restraint to downplay the evil passions and increase attention given to the good passions. Aquinas concludes by saying, "The apprehensive power is not drawn to a thing, as it is in itself, but knows it by reason of an intention of the thing, which intention it has in itself or receives in its own way. Hence we find it stated that the true and the false which pertain to knowledge are not in things but in the mind. So proper discernment of good and evil passions is governed by reason. Will. Aquinas was once asked by a student of his, "Teacher, what must I do to become a saint?" Aquinas' answer was simply, "Will it." The will is the cognitive intent of the soul to act. The human soul can will both good and evil, but ultimately the action that occurs in light of the person's intellectual reasoning is the telltale sign of its morality. In other words, it isn't necessarily what you think that determines whether or not you're a good person. What determines your moral principles is found in what you do. Granted, what you think does add a lot of fuel to the types of actions that you do, but through your ability to reason, you can choose whether to act on your good and evil passions or not. This choice is what is known as will, and when our will aligns with God's through divine revelation, virtue is the only reasonable act that follows. Metaphysics. I probably should have started out with this term, but it made sense to explain all the key terms before coming to a final definition of metaphysics. According to Google, metaphysics is defined as the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. In other words, it is going beyond physics. Metaphysics is a means through which we use reason to come to objective truths of abstract things. This is what Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, and the ancient philosophers did. They used their limitations of human reason to arrive at universal truths about abstract things such as good and evil and responsibility. What they lacked, however, is a solid Christian metaphysics, one that includes divine revelation, which bridges the gap between the limitations of the human mind and the God who we resemble in both image and likeness. This is what Aquinas did, and why we still study him today. The philosophy of the modern world is rank with the self-satisfying philosophy of Descartes, who is famous for having claimed, "I think, therefore I am." His was the first fruits of what is known as moral relativism, a dangerous philosophy that essentially removes human reason and replaces it with his passions. To be simply because we think gives man permission to do whatever he wants without the regulatory faculty of reason to guide him toward virtue. In a morally relativistic world, virtue and vice do not exist, only the satisfaction of doing whatever one pleases. Essentially, moral absolutes are ignored, and the emotional satisfaction of short-lived highs is the only thing that matters. A human being cannot become truly complete until it seeks God in both understanding and act. As Dr. Vost writes, as the intellect seeks to know the true, the will seeks to obtain the good. The intellect operates in the realm of knowledge, and the will in the realm of love. The intellect discerns what is good, and the will acts to get it. The will is the capacity to desire what is truly good. Human beings were given the powers of their intellect, will, and reason to discern the passions that emit from our interior selves, all of which are given to us by God to pursue lives of truth, beauty, and ultimately happiness. It is time for us to start exercising the use of our reason correctly as men and women destined to spend eternity in one of two very different places. Heaven, which is paved with the good, true, and beautiful effects of our virtuous acts, or hell, which is lined with the grotesque, wrathful effects of our vices. Agent Intellect, it's your move.